All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at the Volume. Happy Friday, everybody. Congrats on making it to the weekend. You might notice next to me here on the screen, my good friend, Mr. Carson. We've had no Carson for a while because we've been waiting on a specific piece of equipment that we finally got installed so that we can functionally make this whole thing work. But, dude, it is good to see you, man. How are you today?
Oh, Jason, it is just a joy to be here, and I'm great. Very happy. Some great basketball going on.
Hell yeah. We've got 5 questions from the early chunk of the season here. Really quickly before we get started, please subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements or any film breakdowns that we do. And if you miss one of these episodes and you can't get back to YouTube, remember you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And on that note, Carson, let's get to question number 1. What do you got?
Question number 1. Despite their struggles, the Warriors and the Clippers are still co-favorites to get out of the West. Jason, they're both plus 330 on FanDuel to win the Western Conference. Does that make sense to you? Are they still deserving favorites?
Yes, because, well, specifically with the Warriors, I'll say yes. I don't feel nearly as optimistic about the Clippers. I mean, for starters, there's nobody else in the Western Conference that's really blowing anybody away. Like, Portland's off to a good start, but then they drop a game at home to the Brooklyn Nets last night. You know, like the Nuggets, they're 9-5, but they have lost a lot of games to good teams, and their defense isn't nearly where you expect it to be. So no one's really impressing in a way that would lead you to believe that the Clippers or Warriors are in trouble out west. Now, is there a chasm forming between them and the Bucks and Celtics? Absolutely. I think everybody would agree with that. But in the Western Conference, I'm not overly concerned. With the Warriors, they've got a bunch of issues. Their defense has fallen off a cliff. They're 17th in their last 7 games. Their starters have a 110 defensive rating during that span as well, which is not good. Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole are both struggling a bit offensively. And then their bench has trouble holding leads. They're getting outscored by 13 points per 100 possessions with Steph off the floor, when they're outscoring teams by 7 when Steph is on the floor, which is a 20-point swing. But everything is fixable. The starters aren't defending, but we know they can, and we know they will. They were one of the best defensive units in the league to start the season, and they were outstanding in the playoffs last year, so they will again be outstanding soon. It's just a matter of commitment. Klay Thompson is shooting 27% on a wide open threes. Hot take here, Carson. I think those are going to start going in eventually. Yes, he's had some shot selection stuff, but if really you want Klay to be aggressive, you just want him to be making shots. People are really only complaining about the shots because they're not going in. And then Jordan Poole's a young player who's occasionally going to have some cold stretches. But they're going to find a way to bolster the bench. They've got trades they can make involving the young players. They're going to be a buyout destination because they'll have minutes available. It's a great culture, a West Coast, and a chance legitimately to win a title. They're going to get a good buyout wing somewhere. And then they could always do things like dusting off Andre Iguodala or increasing the starters' minutes as we get closer to the playoffs to just make the bench less important. And then with the Clippers, like, they're playing better, but they're 27th in offense in this last 10-game stretch. Even when they've gone 7-3, they can't score. And then Kawhi, Kawhi was doing janky stuff like playing one first half shift to try to limit his minutes, and he still broke down. So, in what universe is he going to suddenly survive the rest of the season, let alone ever look like the old Kawhi? So, with the Clippers, I'm a lot more pessimistic, but the Warriors' issues, I think, are fixable.
I think the Warriors are certainly in an interesting spot, and I know that you've been a big advocate of make the mid-season move, go out there, put all your pieces in, because this is a title caliber core with an all-time great player, and the future entry you get from the Moody's, the Kumingas, the Wisemans just does not compare in value to the immediacy of, hey, we can win a title right now. And I completely agree with that. I also think it is absolutely necessary because this top 6 is title caliber. We saw it last year. That is undeniable. I don't think anybody's really significantly regressed here. Steph looks even better. Klay is playing very poorly, but it's like you said, I mean, for most of his career, Klay's job has been to make contested shots. And guess what? He's been inconsistent since coming back from injury, but I still think he'll shoot 37% from 3. He'll be okay. But the reality is that the loss of Gary Payton II and Otto Porter Jr. have really completely changed the outlook of this bench. And, Anthony Lamb is the best bench player outside of Jordan Poole right now. And so I like Dante DiVincenzo. He has not looked like the same player he was before his injury in Milwaukee. JaMychal Green has been very meh. So I just don't think you can count on this bench rotation right now to be good enough to really make a meaningful push in the playoffs. But they're not that far away. So I think they have to make a move, but it's not a move that's at all impossible to make, especially with the assets they have, which are decreasing in value, but I'm sure still hold some intrigue.
Yeah, and a lot of the options, because I've had Warriors fans ask in the comments, like, hey, can you provide some options? And it's the same kind of trade targets that you're seeing elsewhere around the league. They could go the route of trying to poach a couple of the role players that are playing for the Utah Jazz, right? They could go after, Jakob Poeltl and Doug McDermott from the San Antonio Spurs, giving them a legit front. Because, right now, they're one front court injury away from the season basically being over. Like, if Kevon Looney or Draymond Green goes down, they're going to have an extremely hard time winning any games. I look at, Miles Turner, for instance, as a guy who, was playing really good basketball this season. And yes, he's been mentioned with the Lakers, but the Lakers don't seem to want him. So someone else is probably going to get him because the Pacers aren't going to, ride this out. Yeah, they're over 500 now, but they're eventually going to pull the plug on all of this. And they're going to, take a first round pick or something along those lines. And you might be able to get him for one of those young players if you're Golden State, especially since I'm sure Indiana would like to get a good wing in there alongside their new backcourt. So, there's options out there. They just have a bunch of different directions they can go. If Anthony Lamb pans out, which he's been playing really well, shooting the ball well, guarding multiple positions. If Moses Moody gets it together, they dust off Andre Iguodala, they increase minutes for the starters. They might not need to do anything. But when the time comes in February, they'll have the flexibility with a bunch of different ways that they can go. And so that's why, like, of all the teams to be concerned about, I just wouldn't be. Like, it's not there. Like you said, Steph looks better than ever. There's the best lineup for the Warriors just isn't guarding the way they used to. And it's only been like 4 months. It's not like they've lost that capability. This is classic, title defense malaise.
Right. The Clippers are also interesting to me because they have been so great defensively, number 2 in defensive rating on the year. And that is probably, I would say, actually, certainly the more reliable predictor of, if you're looking at which end of the floor, which can we trust more, certainly it's the defense compared to the offense without Kawhi, because so much of what the Clippers do is predicated on the isolation, the drive and kick, trusting their perimeter guys to go out there and get buckets. Like, they're 3rd in isolation percentage. They're 29th in passes made, which is just how they've always played basketball. But when Reggie Jackson has not been great, when Norman Powell has not been great, when John Wall hasn't been great, and when you don't have Kawhi, that's basically their entire offensive identity kind of thrown out the window. So I'm not overly confident that Kawhi is going to be himself or healthy. We just don't know. So I think right now, I would certainly put the Suns and the Nuggets right in that same tier. I think all these teams are flawed. I think there's uncertainty with all of them, and I don't think any of them compare to the top tier of teams out east. Certainly agree on that.
Yeah, I put the Nuggets as the one team that I would put as a legitimate Western Conference threat. They're 9-4 when Jokic plays, and that was despite at the start of the season, Jamal Murray still kind of working his way back, and Bones Highland did not shoot well to start the season, but Jamal looks a little bit more and more like himself each and every game that he plays. Bones Highland is shaking off that rough start. Now he's making his shots again. In this recent stretch from the Nuggets, he's shooting like 55% on pull-up threes or something insane like that. Their defense is still just terrible. But we know that they're capable of playing better than they have. They're never going to be a top 5 defense, but they should be closer to 15. And I think they're 23rd right now. So they've just got a bunch of different ways that they can improve. And then to put it simply, the Clippers and the Warriors, that Jokic matchup is just really tough for them. The Warriors have beaten the Nuggets in the playoffs with the injuries that they've sustained, but they've suffered some losses to the fully healthy version of the Nuggets during the regular season because it's just a different matchup for them physically. And then obviously we've seen what happens when Jokic comes into contact with the Clippers. So I'd put the Nuggets as my biggest threat to those two teams.
I would agree with you there. Suns have looked good, but I think their depth is a bit of an issue. And the Nuggets have the potential of being the best offense in basketball on any given night, and that gives you a pretty high ceiling. Let's flip here from some teams that have struggled, but overall there's still a pretty high confidence level in. I mean, certainly Vegas is still respecting them, to a team that has been a complete circus this entire year, And it seems that not even week, every few days, there's a new obstacle thrown at them. So, Jason, does the Nets season get more ridiculous or less ridiculous as the year goes on?
Because the Nets have so much talent on paper, there's always the chance that it could improve. Like if what we saw from Ben Simmons last night is the way he plays the rest of the season, that's encouraging. KD plays like an MVP. Kyrie Irving comes back. They defend the way they defended. Getting what you're getting from Yuta Watanabe, for instance, who, by the way, did a really nice job defending Damian Lillard on switches. He's just super tall and super long and can knock down threes. And he's actually a pretty decent athlete, right? There's a bunch of good there. But as I'm putting that all together, it kind of feels like one of those same game parlays where I make a $2 bet that has a $1,700 payout. Yeah, it could all go that way and we could all get rich. Or the far more likely scenario is that one or two of those things go wrong, which leads to the domino effect of everybody else going off the rails, and then it goes south. We've just seen this movie before. They can play good basketball in the right matchups 2 or 3 games in a row. Like last night, that was an impressive win. They defended Damian Lillard extremely well. They, down the stretch of that game, kind of strangled the pace, got better shots, and it looks good. But a lot of it's matchup dependent. They struggle against the Kings because they've got a couple front court players that are more physical, right? And then Portland, not so much. And then, there's also the reality of the Celtics-Bucks matchups. No matter what the idealized version of this Nets team is, specifically Boston and Milwaukee are equipped to not just beat the Nets, but kind of snatch their heart with the way that they play on both ends of the floor. So you know what? Josiah never stops believing. He's like the ex that's still, or the guy who's still in love with his ex, and no matter how often she stabs him in the back, he just keeps going back. It's one of those types of deals. But my guess is it gets more ridiculous. But it's always on the table that Kyrie comes back, Ben Simmons turns into wing Draymond, Kevin Durant plays like an MVP, Seth Curry does his thing, Joe Harris makes a bunch of threes like he did. You get a couple of key role player performances. Yeah, there is a ceiling here, but that same ceiling has existed all season for various reasons, and it continues to go up and down the way that it has.
I don't know how much more ridiculous things can get, but I also wouldn't really predict them to get less ridiculous. And I agree that last night was, outside of that Knicks game, maybe their best all-around effort of the year. I still think Portland, clearly just felt to me like a more talented team. It was kind of an issue of shot making for them in spots, but the Nets were locked in defensively. Like you said, Watanabe was great. Joe Harris was finally making shots. But it still just feels far too ambitious to bet on everything consistently coming together and gelling, especially when you reintroduce Kyrie. Even though obviously he elevates your offensive ceiling, it's just like the defense was abysmal when he was out there. We have no reason to have any sort of confidence in the chemistry, in the cohesion of this team. Simmons, he finally scored 15 points, and, he attacked a couple times downhill and out of the post, but he's just so clearly not the same athlete. He's not the same defensively. I think he's still in his head. He only took 6 shots. A couple of them were one was a lob off an inbound, one was another lob.
It took 6.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like he is just so far from what he was, what we could have ever expected him to be. So I think we should just buckle in and not invest in any Nets success and invest in a lot more hijinks and mayhem, because I don't see this team winning a playoff series. It's like, to be fully healthy and committed and together and like each other and play both ends against a really good top tier out East, I just think no way.
Well, that's the key, because bad things happen to every basketball team. That's a dirty little secret. There's 2 different kinds of teams out there. There's the teams that complain as the bad things happen, as they spiral out of control. And then the teams that you just look and it's like, oh, the Bucks won again last night. And whoa, 2 starters were out, and Giannis was 6 for 17. What in the world? You look at it and it's like Giannis messed up his foot and is been below 40% from the field in his last 4 games, has missed 3 of the last 7 games, and Drew Holiday's out with an ankle issue, Pat Connaughton's out, Chris Middleton's out, and they're just winning games because they're just in the locker room. There's such a buy-in down the roster that every night you're getting a consistent product. And yeah, even in the downsides, like this past 2-week stretch, all that went wrong for the Bucks, and they went 4-3, and they beat a Cavs team the other day that was, obviously down Jared Allen, but had everybody else available. So like, it's just the difference between the top and the bottom. Like the Nets have demonstrated that a little bit of adversity kind of causes them to fracture, and that sort of thing isn't going to suddenly change in this case.
Yeah, I completely agree. And before the Nets started destroying themselves and embarrassing themselves, they were destroyed and embarrassed by the Boston Celtics in the playoffs last year, who have been really exceptional this year. They're 12-3. They're on pace to have the best offense in basketball history. And obviously they've done this all without Ime Udoka. So, Jason, do you think that his impact on the Celtics was overrated?
Not necessarily, but I do think that in general, when we see things like this, we don't give enough credit to the other party. So, for instance, like Ime Udoka is a tough guy, and he was brought in to help specifically with toughness with a core of players in Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, who had struggled a little bit with toughness over the course of the years, right? And yes, Udoka helped with that transition that led to that finals run last year, but you also got to give those guys credit for changing. To me, it reminds me of like Kobe and Pau Gasol. The narrative is like Kobe changed Pau Gasol. And like, I don't doubt that Kobe's competitiveness and toughness had an impact on him. But give Pau Gasol some credit for just toughening up as he got into late round playoff series consistently. A lot of times it's the pain and suffering of the loss that helps lead to that toughness as well. And again, so it's kind of that kind of thing. Like I give a good chunk of the credit to Kobe and I give a good chunk of the credit to Pau. In this case, what did I say all summer after the Ime Udoka thing came down? I was like, yes, Ime helped with this, but I think the change has already been made by the core players, and they will continue to exhibit that toughness now that Ime Udoka is gone. And that's exactly what has happened. And, give those guys credit. They just, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown came out 3-4 months after an embarrassing loss in the finals, and they both look like better players than they were last year. That's a credit to them. Jason Tatum was a bad isolation player last year. This year, he's been a good isolation player. He's increased his efficiency in a bunch of very important areas. He was a bad mid-range scorer last year. This year, he's a good mid-range scorer. Like you're just seeing improvement from those guys. Give them credit. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, too, in key moments of this series in this season, even though the team defense hasn't been as good as you'd hope, they've locked in, and they're still two of the best perimeter defenders in the entire league. And then, dude, Marcus Smart, what he's done for them offensively as a dribble creator, just getting into the gaps of the defense and creating that initial advantage is super impressive. He's one of the best pick and roll ball handlers in the league this year.
Yeah, I think you put it very well. My thought is kind of what Udoka did last year was extremely important and extremely impressive, but I also thought this year, bringing in Joe Mazzulla, who has been there, it's a lot easier to sustain that defensive culture once it's been established, those offensive principles once they've been established. It's like how Luke Walton could come in and coach the Warriors to being 39-4 because they had already done the handiwork behind Steve Kerr in establishing those habits, those principles. And then, of course, it's difficult to sustain those things, but then it's a matter of the commitment by the players. They're aware of what they need to do, and clearly the Celtics players are committed and continuing to improve. So I don't really think that that'll ever come back to bite them. Do you think right now, if you had to pick between the top teams out east, are the Celtics the team that you would trust the most to win it all?
No, I still give an edge to the Bucks. But I do think that the Celtics have gained ground in a sense compared to where you might have felt about those two teams after their Eastern Conference semifinal last year. But yeah, I wanted to give one last story to just kind of like hammer this point home. When I was in junior college, when I was playing up in Utah, I had a coach. His name was Carter Rowe. Now he coaches at Arizona Western, which is in a conference here in Arizona. And like, he was one of the guys who really targeted my lack of toughness when I was a young basketball player. And I remember like vividly, like ice cold Utah mornings doing planks on the soccer field where the grass is frozen. And I'm like quitting on the drill and stuff. And he's like down just screaming in my face, telling me I'm not tough and stuff like that. And like, he worked on me really hard over the course of that season. And it's like, he hasn't been my coach since that season for obvious reasons, but his impact has lingered with me. And a lot of the things that changed about me as a player that year are still a part of my basketball identity to this day. And that's kind of like the way that a coach can impact any basketball player. And so that's kind of the way I see the Udoka thing. He came in, he worked with those guys for a year. He targeted some specific weaknesses for them in terms of mental toughness. That impact is there even now that he's gone.
And now that role in your life is taken on by producer Ryan Brumley, who's yelling at you when you're down there in the cold. All right. So one of the main stories of this season, or one of the most fun stories, I think, has been the explosion of Shai Gilegeous-Alexander. And you've talked about it recently. He's now at 37 plus in 3 straight games. He's averaging 32 on the year. Is he a top 10 player in the league now?
So this is a delicate conversation because I've been going out of my way for this season to really focus on evaluating players based on this season, because I have some like long-standing philosophies. Like, I'm not going to put younger players over experienced players that have been there and done that in terms of the way I rank them in the grand scheme of things. You know, like for instance, I had LeBron 4th before the season. I will not adjust that in my grand scheme rankings until after the playoffs this year, right? But as we zoom in on this season, has LeBron been a top 4 player? Absolutely not. He's been somewhere between 15 and 11, right? Like, you know, Tatum, I had him down at 6. He's actually been better than that this season in terms of just in the vacuum of this season. You know, like as we go down that list, there's kind of a difference between talking about what's going on this year versus the grand scheme of things. Has Shai Gilegeous-Alexander been a top 10 player in this season? Unquestionably. Maybe even top 5, right? But as I'm ranking him against the other players in the league in the grand scheme of things, I would wait until after the season. I would want, like, how am I supposed to, for instance, I had Paul George somewhere around like 11, right? In the list before the season. Why would I put SGA over Paul George, who 2 years ago, when Kawhi went down, dragged his team within 2 wins of an NBA Finals berth? Like, that's not fair, in my opinion. So just remember, in general, for everybody who's listening, when I'm having these kinds of conversations and talking about these kinds of lists, if it's during the regular season, it's a different type of kind of like measuring system than what I would use outside of the season. But he's unquestionably been a top 10, top 5-ish player this year. He's a top tier rim finisher. Like, he finishes at the rim better than just about everybody except for the usual guys you'd expect at the top. He's a top tier pull-up jump shooter. He's shooting in the high 40s on huge volume. He's excellent in pick and roll. He's 84th percentile among pick and roll ball handlers, and he's a massively disruptive defender. Gets a ton of steals and blocks for a 195-pound guard. You can't argue with the results this season.
I think that that's very sound logic, and I'm generally pretty tentative, at least I try to be, to lift people above somebody else because of a regular season, or certainly only a stretch of regular season play. But he looks like a top 10 player right now. And I think, honestly, there might only be concretely like 7 or so guys who I would say they're better than SGA right now. I think that you hit on it. I mean, he's a top 3 paint guard in the league, unequivocally. He's always had that unbelievable change in pace and slinkiness to his game. His paint footwork is ridiculous, the variety of finishes in there. And then now he's paired it with this elite mid-range pull-up jump shooting game where he's 51% for mid-range, and everyone's terrified of SGA getting all the way downhill, and he just has this incredible ability to stop on a dime, to step back, and to make all those shots. And it's also just incredible that now we have a couple guards in the league, him even more so than Ja, but guys who, they're both shooting well from 3 this year, and they have that a bit in their game, but really guards who are predicated on getting downhill, getting to the bucket, and that's their greatest strength, and they are truly among the best players on the planet. Let me ask you this. How do you feel about the OKC approach around SGA when they have maybe a top 10 player? When he's on the floor, they outscore opponents by 4 points per 100 possessions. They're 11 points per 100 possessions better with him, and yet still, obviously, their roster is so far away from accomplishing anything of significance. Is that justifiable to you at this point? Is that going to become an issue in your eyes? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, I think we can make that call from this point looking forward, because at the end of the day, we knew SGA was good. We didn't know he was this good. Like the way we're talking about this, I guarantee you the front office is talking about this too. Like they're having new conversations now. Like, okay, it turns out we have one of the 10 best basketball players alive. What do we do about this? Like there's Chet Holmgren potentially coming back. They actually sneaky have a bunch of really good wings, including Lou Dort, who's one of the best defensive wings that we have in the league. Chet Holmgren and Alexei Pokusevski represent two really interesting stretch bigs. So they can consistently play 5-out basketball in a way that a lot of teams can't functionally play. They're like specifically with SGA too. What you said that's so interesting. We have a lot of guards who are excellent downhill, and then we have a lot of guards that are excellent pull-up jump shooters. What we don't have is like a guard who's both. The Bradley Beals and the Devin Bookers and the Jamal Murrays of the world, they'll get in the lane and they'll make 1 or 2 shots a game, right? Like they could beat you to the basket if things shake up a certain way. Shai is like finishing at the rim more frequently than Ja Morant, while taking 11 something pull-up jump shots a game and making like 47% of them. Like that is the thing that is kind of unheard of here, is he's got all the pull-up jump shooting with all of the downhill stuff. And that's what makes him so exciting. But my guess is that whatever approach the Thunder had, which was to absorb as many picks as possible, develop these young wings and give SGA plenty of time to develop his skill set while at the same time not wearing him out physically because they're resting him all the time and all this kind of stuff. They were doing that. Now they've got to change their approach. Chet's coming back. Now they'll probably target more veteran players to surround SGA and them. They might look to, I know they signed Dort to an extension. They might try to piece a couple of these guys together and target a star wing out there for a couple of picks and try to go at it with, Chet and some kind of star wing and SGA. But I'm not going to be critical of OKC's front office necessarily unless we're looking at them this time next year and SGA is putting up massive numbers on a garbage team again. I think that's when we could start having that conversation. But I mean, what were they going to do? Go all in on SGA last year when he wasn't this good? And he was good last year, but this is different. What we're seeing right now is a whole other level.
It's completely different. And you talk about blending the skill set of the pull-up jump shooting and the finishing. Just one stat that I think is remarkable on that. The short mid-range pull-up game especially, in terms of people who are leading the league in field goals made from 10 to 14 feet, SGA's second. He's only in a tier with KD right now. Last year, he was not even in the top 25. He's over 2.5 times as many makes on 58% shooting from that range. So I agree with you. He has completely taken a leap. He has still been for 3 years now, though, young, of course, but head and shoulders above everybody else in OKC. So it is a strange dynamic, but I agree with you. This is a different tier. Like now you're looking at young star to superstar. That adjusts your outlook, I'm sure. We have a guy who's also in that young star category, though, already, I think. And that's Paolo Banchero, who is dealing with an injury right now, so he's missed a few games, but has been one of the most prolific rookies that we have seen in a long time. Jason, he was your favorite guy in this draft, ended up going number 1. Have you been surprised by his immediate success in the league?
Absolutely. I mean, I knew he could score, but it's more just the sheer efficiency of his scoring that is so unusual for a rookie. He's averaging 1.11 points per ISO, including passes, which is 75th percentile in the league. He's averaging, this is insane, Carson, 1.41 points per post-up, including passes, which is in the 99th percentile in the league. I went back this morning and I watched every single Paolo Banchero ISO and post-up from this season. And starting with the ISO, everything's built out of this high hesitation in his left hand. He actually prefers to drive left because he likes to drop his right shoulder. But what's wild is there's clips in this set where he's going against some of the best perimeter defenders in the league who just can't handle him when he drops that right shoulder. There's not really a player like him in the league right now. We have guys who are bowling balls, but that are kind of unpolished. Like kind of think like Julius Randle, right? And then we've got like, Giannis, which is just an alien and it doesn't even really compare to anybody else in the league. And then we have a lot of really skinny wings and forwards that have some good footwork and pull-up jump shooting ability and a good handle. He's really the only guy of his archetype in the league who's like giant, like just a grown man on the basketball court as a rookie, who's got the handle to keep guys off balance and kind of, he's always just kind of dribbling and waiting for you to lean one way. And then as soon as you lean one way, he's just punching that gap with physicality, dropping his shoulder and getting to the rim. And then when you're sending extra defenders, he's making the easy reads that are there. In the post, he's going like, what's really interesting about him in the post is he's doing it in every single conceivable way. He's balanced on which side of the floor he's attacking from. He's going over his left shoulder just about the same amount as he's going over his right shoulder. He'll turn and face, and he does like kind of this violent rip through where he brings his elbows up high and dribbles on the right side of his body and then drops his left shoulder and then tries to go physically to the basket. He's got so much versatility there that he's unpredictable. And, what's wild about it, Carson, is like he's a rookie, doesn't really kind of feel the game yet, doesn't really necessarily see the floor super well yet. Over time, he's just going to get better and better and better and better at this stuff. And just wait until the jumper is really polished. He's going to put on another like 5 pounds of lean muscle. Like he'll probably be right around the same weight, but be more lean. And like this kid is going to be so damn good scoring the basketball. Obviously, there's all these other different things we got to look at, like how he develops as a passer over the years, how competitive he is as a defensive player. What is he like just in terms of his demeanor on a night in, night out basis, in terms of bringing good effort and energy? There's always that kind of stuff that could be the things that derail him or prevent him from being, instead of a top 10 player, he ends up being a top 30 player. Like those are all the little forks in the road for him. But he is massively exceeding any potential expectations as a scorer in this league. In fact, he's already one of the best ISO and post guys that we have.
He has a remarkable skill set. And in terms of just his production historically, he's scoring the most points per game by any rookie since David Robinson in 1990. And by the way, he was 24. He was kind of cheating in the rookie category. And still an all-time great player. So I was really high on him. I think that you look at just the prospects we're getting overall, these are super evolved freaks who didn't used to exist before. I thought he could score close to 20. This is 23.5 on league average efficiency as a rookie is so impressive when he is the complete focal point of the Magic offense. It is remarkable. And he's been better in probably just about every way than we could have expected, but still as a prospect, this guy was a 6'10", 250 crazy powerful athlete with a pretty darn good handle who could look like a wing in spots with the pull-up jump shooting, who could attack out of the post, who could roll, who could push in transition, and he's even, overachieved those expectations. I think the post game's been one of the most impressive things. I don't remember him demonstrating that kind of variety in college. It's been really impressive. And I think with the playmaking, you want to see it be more consistent, but his best moments as a passer, he does some pretty advanced stuff sometimes. He makes some pretty remarkable finds in the corners, the ability to sort of adapt midair and still get the ball out with velocity and accuracy. So I agree, he has to develop there, but I think he really will because the moments that you see are so tantalizing, so impressive. The guy's a freak. I was a believer in Chet over him. I thought they were both great prospects, and Chet's going to have to do a lot to validate that opinion right now because I'd be pretty confident that Paolo's going to be an all-NBA guy.
Yeah, I've seen him get Andrew Wiggins off the dribble and just dog walk him to the basket.
Yeah.
I've seen him in the fourth quarter of a close game just bully Jason Tatum to the rim with a spin move for a basket. Physical tools that he possesses are legitimate problems for people.
Yeah.
And not only that, it translates to the postseason specifically because we know that the bully ball stuff always translates better in the postseason than pull-up jump shooting and things along those lines because everyone loses their legs and the shot accuracy and stuff goes down. He's got good passing chemistry already with Wendell Carter Jr., where he'll kind of work into the lane as he's posting up, and then Wendell will just kind of cut behind the basket, and he'll just elevate like he's going up for a shot and then just dump it down for an easy layup underneath the rim. He's good, man. I got to see him up close and personal when I was in Vegas this year, and I remember sitting there thinking like, okay, Jaden Ivey was the most impressive player in the sense that like I came away from that thing being like, wow, I can't believe how good he is. I didn't expect that. And we could talk about Jaden Ivey some other day. But yeah, like even in spite of that, the Paolo thing was hitting everybody in the face in that arena because he's huge. He's just bigger than everybody. Yeah. It's like he's kind of an archetype of player that we haven't seen in a long time.
He is an inevitable mismatch.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, you're completely right. We don't see people like him. No matter who you try to guard him with, he's a mismatch. He will overpower your wings. He will get by your fours and bigs. He's just a monster. Yes,
he is. And I'm very much looking forward to watching him. This was fun, Carson. We got to do this more often, and we got to get into some more of these young guys. All right, guys, Absolutely. That is all we have for today. As always, we sincerely appreciate your support. We are off for the weekend, and then we're going Monday, Tuesday next week before we take some time off for Thanksgiving. As always, I appreciate your support, and we will see you on Monday.